This is Me, I Am Mental, the podcast. A quick disclaimer. The content you find here is neither intended to be therapy or diagnosis. It is provided for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only.
Welcome once again. This is Darren, and my co-host Charles Adede is not with us today, but welcome to Me, I Am Mental, the podcast. This is where we I'm going to say we a lot, but it's just me. This is where Me, I Am Mental is where we talk about issues related to mental health and keep it a little less about like hospitalization or that crazy guy in the corner who's drinking shampoo, but more about mental health and the way that we think about our physical health, like going to the gym. It's not necessarily like going to the hospital if you've hurt your body, but going to the gym to preserve your body and to take care of your body and to strengthen your body. We think of mental health the same way, but we're lay people. We don't know much about what we're talking about. That's why we talk to people who do. And so Charles would normally say we present factual, relatable. I don't know what Charles says. Charles says the same thing every single podcast, but I usually tune out. And so my job is to tell you that you can go to meiammental.me to find out more about the podcast, as well as information about mental health in general, and links to our socials, which is all of them, from LinkedIn to Instagram to Facebook, etc., and even YouTube, where you can find more of our podcasts. And so meiammental.me is the place to go, and we don't charge anything for our podcast. No, your likes and your shares are really the way that we experience currency. We just like to get the word out. We'd like more people to be talking about mental health, and we think that there's more space in the mental health arena for people like us who are just curious, who would like to share information as we learn it about how to take care of our mental health. And so my name is Darren, and today our guest, it's not our guest, it's my guest today on Me, I'm Mental, is counseling psychologist David Jones. David Jones also lives here in Kenya, and we recently became acquainted, maybe a year ago or so, something like that. Mm-hmm. And I thought it would be good to bring him on the podcast and talk. So, ladies and gentlemen, David Jones.
Thanks for having me, Darren.
It's my pleasure. So have you ever been on a podcast before?
No, I haven't.
No. Okay. Well, it feels like this.
Okay.
Yeah. How do you feel?
It's lovely.
It's lovely. Okay, good.
Yes.
And we have a nice crew that are friendly, so that's easy.
Yeah, not bad.
Yeah. And so, David, I don't know as much as I wish I knew about your career here in Kenya. How long have you been here?
7 years today.
Today?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
7 years today.
Oh, nice. What is it? It's almost June.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably, I came in
May 28th.
May 28th. So it's very close to me. I came in June, and that was 2015.
Okay.
Is when I actually
2017 for me.
Yeah. But we're neighbors, which is really weird because we don't have many neighbors. Neither David and I have many neighbors. And so you came here for a job, for the job?
I was working in San Diego on the streets, working with homeless, mentally ill, and substance abuse sorts of people.
Okay.
And I was a little disillusioned with the whole model. The county of San Diego hiring an NGO or a nonprofit, but then the nonprofit owes its life basically to the county, and somehow the tail was wagging the dog. So we were doing more reports, more paperwork, and so accountable to their structure in San Diego that we weren't actually doing the service to the people that we were trying to serve. And it was frustrating for me. My parents live in that area, and they had a Kenyan friend they wanted me to meet one evening on the way home from work.
Okay.
I said, I'm tired. I don't feel like meeting another Kenyan, because they were here. They were here for 5 years in the 90s. And
Your parents?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they know a ton of Kenyans.
Okay. Cool.
And I just didn't need to meet another one. That was my
not on your way home from work. Yeah.
So they talked me into it, and we met at California Pizza Kitchen in Mission Valley, San Diego. I met Terry, who's married to Tendai. Terry was traveling alone. Tendai was here. But she was telling me about a startup, a foundation they were trying to do, and she said, "Why don't you come and be a consultant for us?" I said, "Yeah, rescue me. Get me out of here."
Wow.
So they sponsored me. I came. Yeah. I came for...
between the moment you met another Kenyan.
Yes, Terry.
And
yes.
moved To Kenya.
Yeah.
Oh, for that job. How long?
Oh, it was only about 6 weeks.
Really?
Yeah, it happened very, very quickly.
You just went for it. Wow.
Yeah, just dove in.
Wow,
Yeah.
right on. The way I got here was I knew I was starting a charity, and I knew I wanted to work with, I had done sort of the mental math of how I was going to do the work with puppets. And it was going to be sexually transmitted disease because puppets are really good at talking about things that are uncomfortable
Hard to
subjects.
talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, but then, okay, so which one would it be? Well, HIV/AIDS probably has the most pain associated with it. And so where would that geographically be? More or less sub-Saharan Africa.
Yep.
And I thought, I ain't going nowhere unless I'm invited. I had seen so many missionary types and types who just like sort of leap in and do things just because they feel like it's a good idea. So I was building a house for a widow in Guatemala.
Okay. Good story.
Yeah, that's a big jump. And there was a little internet cafe where I checked my email, and someone said, or my neighbors emailed me, "Hey, your renters have bailed on you. They've disappeared. Just want to let you know." And that's how I was funding myself at the time, was renting out my house in Texas. So I got a link to Craigslist and put an ad for my house. I had it saved in Craigslist somewhere from the previous time. And so I put it out there and I said, if you give me PayPal first and last month's rent, I will tell you where the key is hidden to my house.
Wow.
And someone did it. I couldn't believe it. Like I got my first and last month's rent on PayPal. So I said, okay,
what city in Texas?
It was in Waxahachie. It's equidistant between Dallas and Waco.
Okay.
Yeah. And someone did it. I told them where the key was hidden, under a tree branch, under behind the fence, whatever, in a coffee can. And when I said, I'll meet you when I come back to America. They came back to America, and it was a Kalenjin family who was going to Bible school in Waxahachie. And I was like, how did you trust this? And he's like, I know scams. This was not a scam.
Okay.
Yeah.
And he's a Bible school scholar.
His wife was, yeah.
Okay, so you assume they were honest.
Let's not make too many assumptions. But it was great. It was actually a great relationship. And they said, hey, we read about you and saw your email, your email address and everything, and looked you up and found out what you do. You should come to Kenya with us. So that happened pretty quick after that.
Okay.
I would say it took probably a year to actually move here. But from that invitation, it was probably 3 or 4 months before I got to Kenya the first time.
So we both arrived independently, basically.
Totally.
Sponsored, but independently.
Sponsored in the sense that we'll introduce you to the next step.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
About the same time, except my first trip was 2012. And then, then I got things formal and started the charity officially, and then moved here officially in 2015.
Something about Kenya, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you end up in the same neighborhood right away? Did you clear out to there, to where you live now?
No. It was a journey. So the Terry and Tendai were at the coast in Mombasa and Nyali. And at some point I was looking for housing and spent almost all day looking around Watamu, of all places. Not a great reputation at the time. But it had some nice places along the creek. And then the last place that we looked at was called Fabio's or something like that. It's Italian-owned and overlooked the creek and the ocean. It was just beautiful. So I looked at a couple of places there. And then Francesca, the landlady, said, there's one more room. There's just one more room. And the lady is moving to Nairobi. She's a nice lady. So we went up there. We asked her if we could look at her room. And who opened the door? My current wife.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
You moved fast.
Yeah.
All right.
It moved very, very quickly. So Sharon and I hit it off basically right away.
She's really cool. Sharon's a nice lady.
She's really cool, super smart.
Yeah.
And very accomplished scientist. Now I'm not sure what she's doing with me, but anyway, we hit it off.
Nice.
We hit it off. And then my sponsors decided, look, the elections are coming up. We're not really sure what's going on with the foundation. We're going to send you back. We'll pay your ticket back to the U.S. I said, yeah, okay. I didn't know what else to do. So I went back to the U.S. Sharon and I were like, okay, wow, this is interesting. She's moving to Nairobi. I went back to San Diego. And within 3 weeks, Darren, I got an email from Nazarene University Department of Psychology, the dean of that school. It was not an invite. It was a directive. You are coming to Kenya, and you will be volunteer teaching for us for the September semester. You must arrive for the faculty forum and training on September 3rd or whatever. So it was like a mandate. And I read that to my parents because I happened to be staying with them at the time. And my mom just automatically just said, I've got some savings.
What?
You know, like bounced right back to Kenya. Sharon met me at the airport. And I moved into campus. I had a little guest apartment there. And Sharon was looking for work in Nairobi as a zoologist, as a scientist, researcher, and living with her sister at the time. And within a few months, we were married, and we both volunteered at the school. She volunteered in the environmental department. I did counseling, did the lecturing, and when that semester ended, they didn't have anything for us. We said, look, we're here. I mean, obviously, there's a need for counseling.
Yeah.
This department could certainly use another PhD, an accomplished, researcher. No, we don't have anything for you. We didn't know what else to do but to move up country to her family home, which is in Siaya County.
Okay.
Both of her parents are gone. Her older brother is gone, and that's with the Luos. That's the lineage of where land goes through. Is the brothers, the boys. But Michael was gone already, and so her dad was very progressive. He was the first African doctor at the coast. He was very, very well known, and quite progressive. So he left all the whole house and everything to his daughters.
Oh wow!
Yeah, but even moving in there, I had to get permission from the uncles because it's very unusual for a Luo lady to bring home her husband. As I was told, you need to take her to your home.
Right.
Not come to this home. But we explained, look, we're here to honor Daktari and Mama Sharon and fix up their house. So I did fundi work. Sharon did shamba work. And we grew vegetables, and I fixed up the house, and we got along with the clan in the village. And it's a straight up village. So it was really interesting. There was not another white guy, Mzungu, for miles. Yeah, miles and miles. And some of the children in the neighborhood had never seen a white person before. So it was an interesting experience. We were there for 6 months, and lo and behold, the deputy vice chancellor called us for a meeting and said, look, we've received an endowment with Sharon's name on it, with your name on it, for a 2-year contract at African Nazarene. You'll be lecturing in the counseling psychology department and counseling. Sharon will be lecturing in the ENRM, the environmental department. So we bounced right back to African Nazarene.
Yeah.
And we've both been there ever since.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so at African Nazarene, is that where you're a counselor to students?
I'm a counselor to students, also available for faculty and staff.
Really? And did the faculty and staff take you up on it?
Not so much there. There's been a few. There's been a few.
So not there. So you have more than one.
I have another side hustle. I won't mention the school, but it's a private school in Karen.
Okay.
And I see it as community outreach.
Okay.
And there, I think I probably have equal amount of staff and students, ranging from 5 years old, a little boy dealing with the grief of losing his grandmother, his shosho, who was also a teacher at the same school, all the way up to some mature teachers at the school. So it's a very wide variety in that position. But mainly at African Nazarene, it's mostly students.
Mostly students.
Yeah.
And that's what is the age? I guess it's university age.
University age, anywhere from 18, to 24.
Okay.
But there's some mature students as well.
Okay.
Yeah, doing master's programs and so on. Yeah.
And so you're available just how does it work? I mean, are they assigned you so that everyone eventually meets you, or is it just how do the students get to you?
Well, we're introduced in each orientation in each semester to the new students.
Mm-hmm.
We're in the handbook as a counseling department. There's ads on basically on the website. So if a student is paying attention, they should know that we're there and we're available to support them in any which way they may need.
Mm-hmm.
It's a Christian school, so there's also a chaplaincy office.
Mm-hmm.
And for the, what would you call it, religious type counseling or assistance, prayer and scripture and that sort of thing.
Okay.
And then there's the psychological part of it, the psychology part.
Okay.
That I do with a lady named Ruth Kiryamana, and she's been there 20 years.
Okay.
And so I'm a newbie compared to her.
Sure.
Yeah.
One of the questions that has come up over time with Me I'm Mental and the organization that we're working with, that I run, Project Hand Up, is just talking about the overall question, and not really the issue, but the question is, what is there something unique here in Nairobi or here in Kenya that would set apart people's needs for mental health and psychology, clinical counseling, et cetera, from American people?
Sure. The cultures are very different.
Mm-hmm.
Even within the U.S., we have microcultures, don't we?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. We have the indigenous. We have African Americans. We have now Indians, Filipino, Vietnamese, Laotians, you name it.
Sure.
They're in the U.S. as well as Africans. Yeah,
sure,
it truly is a melting pot. So in the U.S., it depends on your client and which culture they come from in your approach and what you might envision. But specifically Kenya, it's a nuanced answer, I think. Even in Kenya, there are multiple cultures, tribes, and ways of bringing up your children.
My guess, because I'm a layperson, is that maybe socioeconomic levels are greater factors than cultural factors. But that's
I think it's a mix of that. Okay. But you're right. Yeah, there's no way I would charge what I would charge in the U.S. for an hour-long session.
Sure, but in terms of like what sort of things are impacting, I guess I'm talking about the things that impact people's mental health. Okay,
so I would say that adverse childhood experiences are more prevalent in Kenya.
Okay.
ACEs is the nickname. I would say that trauma is probably, I don't know, depends on the demographic and the area in which you're doing counseling. If you're in an inner city in the U.S., the amount of trauma that you're dealing with may equal to the trauma I'm dealing with here. But I think, Darren, people are people.
Yeah.
I mean, in the big scheme of things, people are people, and we are products of our upbringing. There's the nature versus nurture argument, and that's a really interesting thing to look at as far as culture here, being the nurture, and then the nature being what's handed down to you from your parents as far as DNA and genes, that sort of thing. But the challenges are here. The school system is so different here.
Yeah.
So I think the access is there to counseling, but then the proactive, like the U.S., I would say it's a lot more open. It's not stigmatized. They would say, "Oh, I need a counselor," and then you go get a counselor.
Okay.
Here, Kenyans, the way they go to school, I think for the most part, and I could be corrected by our friends here.
Sure.
But you're basically told just to sit there and be quiet and just learn. And if you do raise your hand, then many times you are thought of by the teachers as somebody who is challenging the teacher, rather than having a legitimate question about, what it is. So when I came here and started teaching, I would try to get in a class of 200 new students at African Nazarene teaching Introduction to Psychology. I could not get participation from anyone. I couldn't get questions.
Like in a one-on-one?
One-on-one would be different, but in the classroom,
Okay.
it would just be so different than in a classroom in the U.S. where, everybody's raising their hands, or, you have to compete for the chance to speak up and
Right.
exercise your right to your opinion or your question. Dead silence, and I really, really pushed, and so that was a big cultural difference. So the action of seeking out counseling is a new thing here.
Mm-hmm.
It's often still stigmatized in a big way. Like I've had students come, but then their parents pull them out saying, no, you don't need a psychologist. That's not the way to go. We've never needed psychology before. Why would we need it now?
Right.
And then if they're religious, it's like, well, you just need to pray more
Mm-hmm.
and read your Bible more. And maybe we'll take you to the Deliverance Church and have you delivered
Mm-hmm.
from whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
So it's probably a decades-long adjustment for psychology and counseling to make its way into Kenya, but it is.
Yeah.
Inroads have been made, and I stay busy, and I'd like to think that I'm offering some kind of help, some kind of ministry
I'm sure you are.
to children and students.
Do you think? Where do you think the gaps are in? Oh, I have too many questions. I think I can't articulate all of them. Okay, for a youngster going to school, what sort of childhood experiences, sort of traumas are happening at school?
It's a good question.
Let's imagine our listeners are dads. And we're like, hey guys,
Okay.
Here's what we're running into.
Yeah.
What can you anticipate in terms of ACEs, or even things that aren't necessarily big, but are happening at school in the Kenyan context?
In school. Okay, so let's talk about boarding school.
Okay.
I don't have experience in boarding school.
Yeah,
I'm not counseled at a boarding school before either. However, I have counseled many students that grew up in boarding schools.
Mm-hmm.
There's a pecking order in boarding schools, if I understand it correctly. And like I said, I've not experienced it, and I don't know for sure. But and I don't know who's at the top of the pecking order, but I certainly know that some of the students I've counseled have been towards the bottom.
Okay.
There's sexual abuse, there's robbery, there's bullying, there's intimidation, there's blackmailing, and I can't just paint a broad picture of every Kenyan boarding school at all.
Mm-hmm.
These just happen to be some of the people that I've counseled that have experienced the adverse childhood experiences, even traumas
Mm-hmm.
in boarding schools. There's videos out there. They're quite common. There's teachers that still will line up their students, make them get on the ground, and beat them with a cane.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a secret. Depending on the psychological makeup of the student receiving that beating, that may be a trauma, or it could be an adverse childhood experience.
What would be the difference?
Trauma is just so much more of an impactful, damaging, long-lasting
Mm-hmm.
incident or series of incidents. ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, are these things that happen that aren't necessarily about death and life and sexual abuse. maybe being abused by a teacher, maybe being bullied by somebody. A lot of it's quite normal when you're coming up in school, wherever you are.
Yeah, sure.
It depends on the student and how they are wired and how they handle it. So some of the, maybe 8 out of 10 of these guys that are lined up on the ground receiving beatings, they get up and they laugh about it, joke about it, and then go about their business, and they're fine. And get back to it. Maybe the other two, this has caused some really, really severe trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
and long lasting.
If it was a given that, like, when you go to boarding school, I mean, things are going to happen just like any other school.
Sure.
You're going to be bullied. You're going to have, you might get robbed from your, whether it's your lunch money or it's a whole lot more,
Right.
And it's in a scarier way. Intimidation, of course, is just par for the course of growing up in any sort of public school for us, I suppose. And I suppose any kid's going to go through that. But how do we equip a kid to face what we might consider the inevitable?
The dads. Yeah. I think vetting out the school would probably be what most dads do.
Yeah.
Visiting often would be a prudent thing to do. To listen to and encourage the student to speak up, which is often not done. And keep an eye out for changes in behavior. Often students are referred to me because they've been a happy-go-lucky, good academic performing student, then suddenly they're not. Something has happened. Something has triggered it, the change. So parents being very observant about changes in their child's affect, behavior patterns, and that sort of thing, to be very, very aware of that. Is
there anything you can even tell a kid to prepare them for?
I don't know. Teach them martial arts. Teach them to stick up for themselves. Teach them to be, upright and truthful. I think to know that a child should know that there are going to be these experiences, so they know what to expect, rather than be surprised by them. So then they're a little bit more prepared with, hey, this may happen. And I want to make it really clear. I'm not painting every boarding school in Kenya or every Kenyan's experience at boarding school with a broad brush.
Right.
I'm again just talking about the ones that I have seen in my office.
Yeah, but I mean,
which is a very, very small percentage of people that have gone to boarding school.
I feel like every dude I've talked to who's been to boarding school has something to say. I mean, but I have something to say about neighborhood school growing up in USA too. I definitely had some hard times. Yeah, and there was definitely times where things got really weird, and it was completely inappropriate or whatever. So I think that's part of childhood. But the question is, like, how come some guys make it through childhood so well and some don't?
That's the conundrum. Why do some survive fine and others don't? It's a very, very good question, and I don't know if there's an answer. I don't have an answer for it anyway.
But in terms of empowering or equipping kids, and when I'm talking about kids, I guess right now I'm talking about what we would consider primary age. What do you think is the best things that a kid needs to know if it's not coming from their parents? Like, obviously there's a way like a dad could talk to his son. So, and that's right. Important, but like for teachers, for strangers, for you, for me, for anyone who's not really in the home, what do kids need to know from the rest of us?
If I'm understanding your question, the kids need to know basically from the school experience, right? I mean, what's happening at the school, and the side hustle that I do have is extremely good at offering support all the way through. So there's designated listeners, and I'm one of those as the school counselor, and then there's others where they are encouraged. If anything is going wrong, then you need to come and tell some of these people, and then we fix it and we support you, and you won't be bullied anymore. Nothing bad will happen to you because we're here, we're on guard, we're hyper vigilant against this sort of thing. They're very, very good at it. And just one example, a little guy, he was probably 13 years old, came into my office just really crying. And for a 13-year-old to be crying, that's embarrassing.
Yeah.
So it's a double whammy, right? But a teacher had seen him, I don't know, maybe goofing around outside of class, and the teacher grabbed him by the ear and shook his head and verbally abused him a little bit, and said, "Get back into class." That shocked him so badly, he ran up to my office. So in that case, especially with somebody that young, and I even asked him though, I said, "Is it okay that I tell so-and-so?" He says, "Yeah, you can tell him." That teacher was bounced very, very quickly.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you're not allowed to touch kids at this school. Yeah. So there is measures to protect as best we can.
Yeah.
Even our children, we try to protect them as best as we can. However, they're still going to experience life. Yeah. Yeah. We can only do so much. As parents, as teachers, as counselors, it's life is out there.
We were thinking about doing a program about bullying, and I guess what makes me struggle with teaching children is that if the support system isn't there, that's what they need the most. They need is the structure within the school or within the family.
In the home.
Yeah. But minus that, is there anything a third party can tell a kid, teach a kid, help a kid understand?
Depends on where that third party is. A lot of times it's at church. Yeah. Or it's on the soccer pitch, the football pitch. Or, I don't know, a swim coach or something. I don't know. Yeah. You can't just go hold up a sign, "Hey, I'm a third party. Come to me for advice." Yeah. I think just for them to do their jobs responsibly, and set good examples, and treat even children with a semblance of respect and value. Not coddle them and not spoil them, not help them to become entitled, but to certainly be kind of like a mentor guide in whatever venue that this child may be spending time with outside of the home and outside of school. So that's the huge responsibility of coaches, of church leadership, youth group leadership, and then extended family as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. What kind of advice do you send a kid out with when they come in?
Oh, when they come in, what kind of advice do I send out? That's a good question, but I really work on self-esteem. Yeah. I really work on helping the especially the younger ones to become individuals and to know their worth. So even with adults and children, it's a very simple exercise. People might say it's overused.
Okay.
But and it's maybe pop psychology, but cognitive behavioral therapy is about changing the thought process to something that works for the person that's receiving it, whatever that is that they want to do or be. But it's just positive affirmations. And you wouldn't believe how often I'll just say, "Hey man, what is awesome about you? Tell me something awesome about you." And some people, even adults that have been beat down their whole lives, they can't come up with anything. They can't come up with one thing that they are proud of themselves for. It's really quite sad. So I'll sit with them and I'll go, "Look, university student, hey, you somehow made it through secondary school. You somehow got a score that got you into a private university. I would say that would make you intelligent, wouldn't it?" They're like, "Oh, yeah, I guess so." And then, and I am a Christian, so there's some angles that I will take. especially about valuing one's life as a created being.
Mm-hmm.
And that, of course, is with the permission of the client.
Right.
Otherwise, I don't go there. But positive affirmations and helping my clients find out what those are and enlightening them, because many of them don't know or hadn't even been aware that they have talents, that they are valued, that they are intelligent, that they are loved. I feel
like there might be, like, from our American perspective, affirmations aren't hard to come by. In the elementary school or primary school, even high school, where it's just like people are saying positive things. You're special, you're important, you're valuable, etc.
And it's the pendulum gone the other way.
Sure.
It's produced an entitled generation, I think.
Yeah. So that's another subcategory there of sort of the Mr. Rogers sort of popularized it, began that, but I think there wasn't anyone looking directly into the camera saying, "Hey."
But I teach also that you're not better than anybody else. You're just awesome. You're an awesome person. You should be proud of yourself. Carry yourself that way, but treat others just as you treat yourself.
I used to when I began doing elementary school anti-bullying assemblies. That was my career for a long time. Actually being the guy in front of 300 kids at once, and that's where I'm most comfortable, is on stage in front of like 300. Like 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds.
Fun stuff.
And there was a part of the show where it was like, everyone take one finger, point at yourself and say, I'm important, I'm special, I'm valuable, and both fingers and say, and you are too.
Yep.
Because that's if you are, then therefore the person next to you
that's
is.
Exactly
treat
right.
them as yourself, etc. Is that message happening here as much?
Not in schools.
Not in schools.
Not that I know of. No.
Really. Mm-mm. I also sort of wonder if it's happening as much in churches, because I feel like the churches here sort of lean more towards like he is coming and faith, as opposed to love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, self-control,
the actions.
And so it hurts to see that. Like, I had so much encouragement growing up, but I think one of and that other kids don't, and especially seeing I don't interact with children that much here one-on-one or personally, but sort of more as our organization reaches out to kids. But you just don't see the affirmations on the walls. You don't see it's everywhere.
You don't see it. You don't see it here nearly as much.
I think the best thing that happened to me in my childhood was at junior high, which is a really weird age. That the age of like 11 and 12, where a kid is still a kid, but looking at not being a kid, and they kind of can go either direction. And I remember immediately after junior high began being a volunteer counselor for junior hires, and one of the teachers who had been with like 11-year-olds for like 40 years is like, check this out. This is the age where that kid will be just as comfortable playing Red Rover as they will be smoking pot. But they're just going to do either one,
right?
However their influence goes, because they're all over the place.
They're in that no man's land.
Yeah, and it's such a special age. And at that exact age is when the people in my church, the men in my church, started encouraging me, hey, being unusual, being different, best thing. It's so good. It's all right to be, remember the T-shirt of all the fish, and then the one fish going the other way, so go against the flow. Remember that one?
Yep.
The best man at my sister's wedding was the one who was the artist who made that.
Oh, wow.
But that was sort of the thing, is the idea of it's okay to go against the flow, be different and be special. And not special, but just like contrary. And it's totally all right. That self-acceptance of being there. And I wonder, is that a message that needs that I don't know. For me, it's pop psychology, but for you in practice, is it really? It meant so much to me. Do you see that as a truth here?
Well, it's not the only intervention I use, but it's the start.
Really?
Yeah. For me, it's foundational to know your value. Yeah.
Know your value. And so, okay, if that's a start, then where do you go from there?
Depending on the case, depending on what it is, but using that as a foundation. That the individual is a valuable human being that and their opinions matter, and they should be allowed to share those opinions and to grow and to excel.
But is that not just an annoying American thing, or is that something that, because Americans have this thing of rugged individuality, you got to be different, you got to be whatever, and that's okay. But in other cultures, moms and dads want you to fit.
It's so I'm only counseling the person that's in front of me.
Right.
And a lot of times the protagonists are maybe the parents or somebody outside of the room
Mm-hmm.
that I have no control over and I can't change. Even in relationship counseling,
Mm-hmm.
Somebody coming to me with, my husband doesn't listen to me when I yell at him every night. He won't tell me where the money's going. He won't tell me where he's been from the end of work to 10, 11 o'clock at night. And no matter how much I yell at him, he does not respond to me. I said, wow, that must be really frustrating. She goes, yeah, it's horrible. I've been doing this for years and not having any results.
Yeah.
And so I've said, we can't change him. I don't know how to change your husband, but we can change you. You can change you. You can try a different approach to your husband. So we worked on maybe some things like, okay, so he comes home. She brings him tea and asks him how his day was. That was a start. But it was very awkward for her because it wasn't yelling.
Yeah.
And it wasn't questioning and it wasn't grilling him over where the money is and everything. So she just gradually became a nicer person, stopped yelling, and just went about her business knowing that she wasn't going to know where the money was going and where he was at and all of that. She just decided just to be nice, to be cordial, and ask him about his day and bring him a cup of tea. It wasn't long. It was just a few months later. They kind of, their relationship rekindled. He took her to where the money was going. He was helping out his brother on some land up country. Where he was going at night, I don't remember, but just to get away from her, probably.
Right.
But it changed her approach. When her approach changed, his whole affect changed. Their whole relationship changed. So we find a change within ourselves, and then somehow that reverberates through our environment when we take a different approach at living our lives in conjunction with others. Yeah. So that's another thing.
Where do you think the gaps are in mental health here in terms of not the gap, but what are some of the needs that more people need access to?
Well, I think just more counselors, and they're being trained in every universities now. All
Really?
the universities in Kenya have a counseling department, counseling psychology department, as far as I know.
Are there jobs for them when they get out of there?
That's a really good question too. At least they are out there.
Right.
I think the jobs are coming.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really do. I think the government should probably mandate that there be a counselor, a trained, educated counselor in every school, at least one.
Mm-hmm.
And then that would hire a lot of people, and it would help a lot of children.
Yeah.
If the government could kind of see beyond their need for money and really look after the people, I think that would be a very, very good step to mandate counselors in every school.
So having that available is for certain one of the things. If you start with a kid who's just struggling, just being a kid, and in the starting place is you're valuable, and so you have something unique to contribute to the world. What's the next step? What comes after that?
Sometimes there isn't one.
There is what?
Sometimes there isn't one.
Oh, that's all they need?
Or it just isn't going to.
It's not enough.
It's just not going to land on fertile ground. I can't. If I thought I could help every single person that walked into my office, I'd be delusional. Some people just, they don't respond. So I push and I challenge to do introspective work. Like, what's going on within you? What can you change to help your happiness increase, your contentment with life increase? Let's look at some of these things that have happened to you and work on airing them out so that you can regain a semblance of equilibrium, of balance in your life. Some people don't want to go there. That'll be their last session, is their first session. Yeah. They just don't want to enter into that world of horrors that they've experienced, or take a look at what's really inside themselves. That's why we have so many people projecting all over society.
Yeah.
You know, it's their fault. It's them that's doing me wrong, and blah, 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 blah. And it's in relationships too. It's her fault. It's his fault. It's much easier to project than go, wow, okay, what could I have done different in that situation? What could I have said that might have brought on peace rather than war?
Right.
Maybe in a couple's relationship, or maybe even with friends. You know, friends get after it as well. Because they project onto one another. So the introspective work is the challenge, and I think that's probably why the majority of people don't. Well, maybe not why, but it certainly is a contributing factor. Is there's nothing wrong with me. I mean, that's how deep that is.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with me. I survived abuse. I've survived rape. I've survived whatever. So why can't the rest of them? You know, if I survived it, then let the children survive it as well.
Yeah, that's a tough one too.
That's a tough one.
That's a real tough one. I remember I knew someone whose kid was abused in the family, so she went to the police, and the policewoman said, "Yeah, it's happened to everybody. What's the big deal?"
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's
or look at your wearing. Of course, that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Your shirt's too short.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's the blame the victim thing, but for the first time, it made me, what you just said made me think that if that cop had any other point of view, they would have to address their own abuse.
Yes.
And I never thought of it that way.
Right.
It's not just being callous. That's not a problem.
Because I went through it.
Yeah. And
and everybody else does too.
Yeah. And it would take so much work on their part.
Yeah.
To admit that is a problem, because they'd have to address it for themselves, which would be awful, I suppose.
Right. So another big question that I ask, probably one of the key ones, is what do you want?
What do you mean?
Like, you come into my office, what is it you want? What is it you want with your life? What are you hoping to get from this interaction?
Yeah.
And I get a variety of answers. But I think the most common one is peace, happiness, contentment.
I don't want to feel like this.
I don't want to feel like I am feeling now. Yeah, I want to feel so much better. But it's a definitive question.
Yeah.
And it's a challenging question, because a lot of people go, "Oh, yeah, what is it exactly that I want with my life? And how can we work on that together?" Yeah. But then that gives me a trajectory of where to take the therapy.
How long is a session generally?
Generally 50 minutes to an hour.
Okay.
For children, it could be 5 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
And it involves kicking around a football.
Yeah.
You know, or it involves art. Could involve puppets. I know there's a lot of puppet therapists, probably in the States.
Yeah. And
other places, but I don't think that's done here. But yeah, it actually.
Do you know anyone who's doing puppet therapy at all? I got a book. I got a couple books on using puppets for therapy. I'd love to find someone to come through our doors who wants to do it.
It would be especially good with the youngsters. Yeah, youngsters that have possibly allegedly been abused.
Yeah.
To get to just kind of infiltrate their imagination and feeling of safety too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have this really, we're going to interview someone soon. Her name is Darcy Mays, but she invented this sort of style where the puppets themselves have a little opening on the side of their chest, and then you can reach inside. There's a little like crochet heart on a string, but that heart is actually a pocket. And so when she learns something about a kid that she suspects may be the trauma, she'll put an item inside that little pocket, and the puppet will talk to her, and she'll just it's like a little performance, but the kid's there, and they don't have to talk to the puppet at all. But the puppet will talk to her as the therapist.
Interesting.
Say, there's something inside of you? What's in? Open up the heart, and it'll be a little item. It could be a shard of glass or something. Do you feel like something is broken inside? And the puppet's like, yeah. So it just sort of leads the imagination of the child to be able to express what might be inside themselves. It's all metaphor that's graspable by kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe I should take a class.
Yeah, well, I've got her whole video series. Yeah. She's pretty amazing. But I guess that's probably the only form I've actually seen in person where I've seen that method used. But the other one is, I think, just giving puppets to children and let them act out. Just begin just to do it. It's really funny how the puppet can work as a sort of a proxy. Like you ask someone to act it out, they're not going to do it. But if they have a third party that can show emotion and you can just project there, it's a really fascinating art form in that way. And so, and that's kind of what me and the guys would like to do, is we'd like to develop a show that we could take into schools that, it's only going to be an hour, but in that hour, what are the best, I've done bullying programs, and I have a pretty good idea of what needs to happen in a bullying program. But and I've also worked with many people who've done child sexual abuse. Sort of, it's not so much prevention, but I guess awareness. There's sort of awareness talks with children about what is appropriate, what isn't, what red flags to look for, et cetera, to sort of just be aware of what abuse is and how to deal with it. But we're thinking of developing something that sort of is a conglomeration of those two things, but at the same time, we don't know what we don't know. And we're wondering what a third party like ourselves could go in and present information that isn't necessarily dependent on having a structure behind it, a reporting structure. Of course, a reporting structure is ultimately the best case scenario, but minus that, what can you tell kids? Okay,
so this generation coming up, and I don't know, generation, what's the one after X? The social media generations.
The millennials
after X
is
they got into it, but this generation in particular coming up, and that are already in high school, I think even if you go grassroots on this, limited cell phone time, monitored cell phone time, social media free zones, parents being so much more proactive at what their children are looking at, how long they're on a phone, and what are their conversations, and to very vehemently and closely monitor, because babies are picking up phones now, and they're scrolling like their parents do. They're just watching their parents. They know how to do it.
Yeah,
it's becoming intuitive. But what it's doing, Darren, if you're on TikTok?
Yes, I have an account, but I don't look at it.
Okay. So some of the teenagers that I'm counseling are depressed. And there's been a huge uptick in depression throughout the world. And a lot of it seems to be related to social media. The hours spent on phones, the inability to focus, the inability to sit, read, study, perform well on exams, coming to school exhausted because they've been up to 3 or 4 in the morning just scrolling through TikTok or Instagram. And there's a new video, they're anywhere from 30 seconds to 60 seconds, most of them. So there's a new picture coming. There's something bright and shiny that's just keeps appearing. And have you seen The Social Dilemma on Netflix?
Yes, I have.
What that child is scrolling is specifically made. There's a logger. a program that's designed for them to keep them on the phone.
Yeah,
right?
the guy who made Social Dilemma is the guy who invented the endless scroll, and he forever feels a debt to society because he just,
it's really raking havoc on
people
our
forget
children.
that there used to be an end.
Right.
It used to, any website had an end.
And then you put the phone down and go do something else.
Right. It's just stopped. You'd have to go somewhere new to whatever. And now
so what's happening is the attention span is becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. Remember, in our generation, they were worried about attention span because we were only watching a show on TV for 10 minutes, and then an ad would come up. And then an ad would be a minute, and then there'd be another ad, and then another ad. And that was now the cause of attention deficit disorder. But now it's just becoming a crisis.
No, I think I have it too. I've got popcorn. They call it popcorn brain.
You're always now searching for something, always wanting that dopamine release. What's interesting, and then finally the dopamine runs out. They're not getting that rush anymore, so they become complacent and have no energy and don't see the zest for life. That's one of the things, and the inability to focus and then relate to others in a face-to-face situation because their face is always in the phone.
Yeah.
So the social aspects of it are detrimental as well.
I saw.
It's extremely, in my opinion, the social media world is really, really destroying our youth. Academically, intellectually, the ability to focus and relate to one another.
Yeah.
It's a very sad thing. So parents can do something about it. They just have to, especially in the ages of 1 to maybe 6.
Sure. Yeah.
Right, but parents will give the phone to the child because it keeps them occupied.
Yeah.
They don't have to be playing with them or watching them because the young child is going to be scrolling. That is affecting the brain development.
Have you found any success with actually just explaining this to teenagers?
Yes.
Do teenagers actually slow themselves down?
Yeah, they do. Some do. Yeah, I encourage fasting.
Really?
Yeah, social media fasting. Like, okay, so I would challenge them, see who's the boss. Are you the boss or is your phone the boss?
Really? No, that's an interesting one, isn't it?
Can you put your phone down for 1 hour and turn it off and go do something else for 1 hour? Is that possible for you to do that? And if it's not, then try 30 minutes. If that's not possible, do it for 15, but try to increase the amount of time of your fast. Because what is your phone doing for you anyway? How is this endless scrolling really enhancing your life?
I had a situation where the first time I was in a viral video in Kenya, like 4 years ago or something, 3 years ago, I don't know what it was, people would approach me and I want to get a selfie with you. And it was, I don't know where I was, but it was happening a bunch in one event. People kept coming. And the number of women who came up to get a selfie who had filters on their phones, and they didn't even realize it in that way. I go, hey, I don't want this picture because it put like lipstick on me and defined my features and smoothed my skin. But they were looking at themselves.
Yeah, it made you more white too, probably.
I don't know if it did or not. Yeah, it might have. And I was like,
That's
whoa, that's like, no, that's not good. It's like, no, it's fine. And I go, no, that's not fine. That's really
not
disturbing.
Me. Yeah.
But they weren't looking at my face. They're looking at their own.
Right.
But it was so unnatural. I thought, if this is what people need, it's like they needed it. No, they would not turn off these filters.
Yeah.
Like I want to see myself like this.
It's the alter ego that those filters can produce. And so the other dangerous thing about it is the comparison.
Yeah.
They're looking at other people's lives constantly and going, wow, that person's life is interesting. I wish my life was like that. So the comparison aspect will really kick in. Gosh, my life is worthless. I don't have what they have. Mm-hmm. I don't have any purpose like these people have. I'm just watching them. I'm observing them. I'm not one of these people who gets to live life.
Mm-hmm.
it was either Teddy Roosevelt or Mark Twain, well before any of this, that said comparison is the thief of joy.
Yeah.
So I also teach, look, stop comparing yourselves to others. And go back to the beginning. You're a uniquely created, whether you believe that or not, you're still unique. And you can be your own person and do your own things. Stop comparing yourself to others, because you'll always find somebody that you think is better or prettier or more successful. It's not the way for you to become successful.
What age does that kick in?
Yeah, I think it kicks in quite young, right around adolescence.
So 11,
that's
11,
when you start becoming conscious of what people are thinking of you. You know, children below, 11, 10, if you watch them play and interact with one another, it's freedom. They say what they want. They do what they want. They eat dirt. Whatever. They lay around on the floor.
I remember the quote. It was at my own school. I remember seeing a little girl crying, and she was like, "We were all friends until this year. Like we all got along until it was."
And then, as in that transition period you were talking about earlier, that transition to teenagehood. That's when you start thinking, I need to dress better. I need to wash my face. I need to clean my nails. Girls are going to be looking at me now, kind of thing, and vice versa. That's when the comparison, I think, starts.
Well, and I guess that's where it sort of dovetails with the it's okay to be different, it's okay to be unusual, it's okay to be yourself.
Yep.
The need to fit in, because there's sort of the big cultural thing of like, our family needs you to align with what needs to happen in your life, which I think is a really probably more prevalent here. I mean, it definitely happens in USA for sure, but I feel like the family pressure to conform is quite marginally stronger here. But then there's also the sense of like the need to fit in socially, and the need to fit in like socially, culturally, like in the grander scale as well, and then comparing, am I as good as them, etc.
Right. Yeah, it'll take your joy.
It'll steal it.
Away. It'll steal it, and it'll make your life uncomfortable.
Yeah. It does seem like the pressure's harder here. Whenever I interact, even with adults, like the pressure to like just constantly be moving up, constantly try to make more, earn more, do more, have more.
So you can send it home to the family.
Like, I guess there's that.
And
I mean,
support your cousins, and
in USA it was like materialistic, but here it's that and more. Like people, I remember
there's a social responsibility for those that have jobs and education. There's a lot of pressure there.
Yeah. It's hard to watch. Like I've had a few dudes who are like a little bit younger than me, just the Kenyan guys, come to me and say like, how do you do this? Like my family's like, because I'm still single, so that's a huge thing. Like they just want me to be married like now, and I don't want that for myself right now. I do want it, but not now. Like how do you do it? And I'm like, it's not the same for me. Like the pressure's not the same. But it's just to watch, like it's not very common for a Kenyan dude to reach out in such a personal way, but it's happened to me several times. And then, but the pressure again is so high. And I remember I was going after a client for another company to do. I had two reasons to go to a pretty widely known organization and go into their marketing department. And so I wore two hats when I walked in. And one of them, they wanted a mascot character built for their company. And it's a huge company. They're everywhere. And so I went in and to the office, and I sat down. And I said, so what? Can you show me exactly what you're looking for? Because people come to us for this. And so they started showing me. And then when they turned their monitor around, I realized that they had already been talking to the same organization that I was going to hire to do the final product. I was going to end up being the middleman, which would have been a good thing, except I was like, I just go, hey, I see down in the corner there that you've been talking to that company. You don't need me. They're actually going to do exactly what you need. And there's really no I mean, I can advise you and stuff, but if you go, I'm going to charge you more, and it's just going to be another step. And they're like, why are you telling us this? And I'm like, it's a waste of time and money. Like, I don't need the business that badly that I need to be between you and that person right there. And they were just astonished. Like why are you being so honest? And I'm just like, I don't need more work in this way. It's gonna. I could make some money, but the amount of headache I'm going to go through and everything. I'd rather be happy than rich.
Yeah.
And actually, during that conversation, another person from another department had walked in, and they go, "Hey, Darren does this," and I go, "Yeah, I do this, but I do not offer that service or that service." And they're like, "Why not? You can make so much more." I'm like, "Guys, I want to be happy. It's not worth the money to work that hard. What you're asking my company to do, it was so much more work that I can't even imagine doing that." But they couldn't fathom the idea of not trying to grasp as much as possible at all times.
Right.
And
it's that corporate,
it's a
capitalistic mindset.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's just intensified here, I think.
I think so.
I mean, it definitely existed in, when I was in Dallas, for sure.
But happy, what's so great about happiness?
Yeah,
no, you want a big house and a big car and all that. It's not about happiness.
But I mean, but you read any book about successful people, or they say, hey, there's a point where this extra money doesn't help anything at all. I'm not necessarily at that point. I would like to make more money, but the fact that it's foreign to so many people, and it probably starts at a really young age, where the pressure to just be pressure.
There's a lot of pressure on our secondary school students to.
Did your parents pressure you in terms of expectations? You need to be this good.
They lost faith in my abilities early on because of my adverse childhood experience of being caned. Yeah. I grew up in Sydney, Australia, in the British school system. This is very similar to the Kenyan school system. You just sit down, shut up, and learn. And if you go out of the boundaries, then you can get caned. And I'd get caned every now and again. They'd bring it down across the tips of your fingers. In primary school, they'd cane you on the back of the leg because you're wearing shorts. But I went and asked the teacher, who happened to be the headmaster as well, if he could help me with the long division problem. And I had skipped some questions to get to the long division. And he started slapping the back of my leg. And this is in front of the whole class, a class that I was new in. And every slap he's saying, "You stupid," slap, "lazy," slap, "boy." And he repeated that. And so I sent back to my desk just going, okay. And for many, many years, I guess I'm stupid and lazy. My parents even thought, well, I guess David's not going to do much with his life. Maybe he certainly isn't going to do anything in college or university or anything intellectual. He's not that bright. So it was that hard set kind of now, why should I even try to be intelligent? Why should I even try to work hard in university? I went to school, but I dropped out and joined the military, the U.S. military, and was somewhat successful there. But still came out of it going, you're just not smart, man. You're just not that kind of person. And even though I had surrounded myself with very smart people, and smart people like to be friends with me, doctors and that sort of thing, guys that I surfed with, super smart people.
Yeah.
And they liked my company. But I didn't see that. I never saw that. So to combat those kind of adverse childhood experiences and to tell the child or even the person, no matter how old they are, let's reboot this. Let's start this over with you as a person of value. And you see how I keep going back to that as foundational. But it sent me on a trajectory of failure until I went back to school in my very late 30s.
Really?
And even then I thought, you just don't have it. And I had a professor that said, no, we'll get you through. You can do this. I see your intelligence. I see that you can accomplish this. You will graduate from this school. And I did. And then went on to get my master's, which just, the fact that I even got my degree, my parents were just so shocked. And then when I went on to get my master's, they were doubly, like, had no idea David had it in him to be able to accomplish something like this. Because they were also told by the teacher, yeah, don't worry about him. He's not going anywhere.
Really?
Yeah. So that's a mild adverse child experience, but it was extremely. It carried and had extreme consequences for many, many years. And even now I fight self-doubt, but have become much, much better at curtailing it. Yeah.
I have a tangential question about helping kids. Is there any theory behind taking a kid who's struggling and giving them another kid as a project? Like, hey, this, you notice this kid has some sort of problem with their identity or how they're feeling or how they're emotionally coping with the world, but giving them a job, like, that person over there needs a friend. And if you could help them and just sort of making them an employee of goodness, does that have is that a practice?
It is not that I know of in schools. We have a mentorship program at Africa Nazarene, but I don't think it goes to that level. We also have peer counselors that are available to assist. But I get what you mean.
So
but
even if it's like a social thing, it's not official.
With some of my depressed adult clients,
okay,
to help them get out of their own heads, I will encourage them to go volunteer for an orphanage, for a center for sexually abused children, for whatever, a food bank or whatever, Feed a Comrade program, to do exactly what I think you're talking about, is to help them gain some value in themselves as they help others.
Yeah, because it's a thing that sort of happens when you're. I think I remember a librarian once when I was a kid telling me, "Hey, there's a new guy in school, and he's doesn't really know people. He's not. Can you grab that guy? You be his friend. Just hang out with him. Just couple minutes every day, whatever." And I think that did something for me. Made me feel like, I
have a sense of purpose.
Sense of I can help.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Yeah.
I was chosen to do this. And someone thinks enough of me that I would be capable of helping someone else. Is that a thing that counselors do? Was someone pulling game on me? Is that what was happening when I was a kid?
I think that's pretty good, and maybe I can utilize that as one of my interventions.
Well, one of the things we do in our I tell the guys that are performing for children, if you have one particular child who's really a problem, you sort of make them your bodyguard. Hey, come here. Hey, I have a lot of problem with kids, grabbing, doing punching, whatever. I want you to you keep me safe. And so they're like, so now they have a job.
Yeah.
So the problem kid is now the kid that sort of becomes the prefect or whatever, the hall monitor. And it just keeps their mind off of
Right.
whatever they were doing and gives them a job.
Certainly is a strategy.
It's a strategy. I wanted to know if I tapped in on something that's actual.
I think maybe so. Yeah.
That's interesting. I don't know. I just wish every kid had as good as experience as I did. But I think one of the main things is that I had adult men who encouraged and just said, "Hey, here's how life is, and here's how it's okay to be unique and special." But I also had parents who didn't have needs put on me. They didn't need me to be anything in particular. It was just love, support.
Mm-hmm.
You got a place.
Yep.
When you're home, you're safe. And when I watch other people raise kids and everything, they have all these like pretty extreme theories, and I'm like, seems like they all turn out pretty much the same, so long as they have love and support at home.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise,
it's a huge factor is parent involvement, parent interactions.
But then I have my peers that have parents who just like demand it. You need to be like this. They're hurting even in their 40s. These guys are just the pressure.
Yeah.
And they're not well.
Mm.
And I feel like it's just like they talk about how mother still says this, or can't never make dad happy. It's like, ugh.
Yeah.
And it never stops. It never ends for them.
Yeah, I think it's a human condition. I don't think it's something you compare one country to another necessarily.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's all there.
Mm-hmm.
Every single place. But I wish I had the ability to just hand out the good childhood that I had to everybody else. And I'm wondering if there is a place again for our organization if we only came in an hour at a time. What do you tell kids? But I like the self-esteem thing is important, and then the comparison, and then just getting the brain to work better by not being on social media.
Yep.
Those are
some key things.
Three big things.
That and those all take parent involvement as well.
Yes. Although you said you could actually encourage kids to see who's the boss of the phone.
Oh yeah. It's a great challenge even for adults.
That's an interesting one, because that doesn't require another authority figure.
That's true. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like turn off your notifications. See if you can do that. That can be challenging. That with you turning off your notifications, that means you're taking control of your phone, rather than the phone saying, beep, 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 look at me.
Yeah.
I've got something interesting here for you. You must look at it, and people do, of all ages. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But can you turn your notifications off? Can you set your phone down and turn it off? Go read a book? Go take a walk? Call somebody up, have a conversation, instead of just being head into the phone. It's a challenge for most people, even for me. The phone becomes an appendage. It's always with you. There's some reasons for that too. I have to be in touch with my students, faculty and staff, and that sort of thing. But it can be a challenge just to set it down, turn the screen off, and focus on something else. Fortunately, I have to do that in every counseling session.
That's cool.
Yeah, it just goes
really
away
nice
for an hour, and you can get back to it. Excuse me, and whatever's there, it's still waiting for you. It's not like an emergency usually.
Right.
So it's the fasting is actually, I think, a very, very helpful strategy to regain some semblance of the phone not being the boss.
Yeah, the podcast is one for me. That's one where I don't have my phone.
Right.
Otherwise, it's pretty insane. It's absolutely insane. I don't know. I've been when I was a child in like 1982, 83, 84, our neighbors sold computers. And so that was like Texas Instruments TI-99. The Atari ST was actually like an Amiga thing, and Commodore 64, and then finally the 86 or whatever, and then from there to the 286, 386, and Microsoft DOS, then Windows. I was always there, but no one else was. There was only like 10 of us, the kids that had these, whose parents were weird enough to get them a computer at that time. So I'm possibly the oldest person, the oldest possible age you could be, having grown up with a computer, and it's not good. I'd really love to just like completely throw it away. That would be really. I would be really interesting to have a year or the rest of my life without a computer.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that would be
probably
really,
somewhat
really
refreshing.
Yeah.
Once you get over the, what do you call it? The
withdrawals.
The withdrawals. Yes. Yeah.
I wonder how long my pocket would vibrate without a phone in it.
Oh, I have that.
Feeling,
that phantom vibrate. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a real thing.
It's a strange thing.
And then tomorrow night we're going to the Dave Chappelle comedy show, and it's in the advertising it says no phones. Your phones will be taken, put in a pouch, and returned to you after the show.
Yeah. Has
that ever happened in Kenya before? Do you think that's going to work? I mean, there's no choice, but I'm guessing guys are going to have multiple phones. But like, Dave is very strict about it. Like, he will throw people out if they're on their phones. But he's
another psychologist of sorts.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And so to see how that's going to go down tomorrow, my guess is it means people are going to be getting up and leaving the auditorium again and again and again to go check their phones.
Yeah,
that's probably what'll happen.
Yeah, they're missing out on something.
Yeah. Right. So that's a lot. I don't know. So. We can begin to wrap things up a bit, but where do you see? Are you sticking with this? Is this what you want to do? Work on one-on-one with guys?
Well, my stage, the stage I'm at with my age and life. I'm sticking with it. And I'll do it.
What drew you to it in the first place?
Past retirement, desperation for finding a degree program. But always having the desire to assist people. I've been an empath ever since I can remember. Felt sorry for the downtrodden.
Yeah.
For those that have been hurt, for those who, what we used to call back in the day, handicapped. I would pay special attention to those type of people and want to assist them. So it fits into my general makeup as an empath.
Yeah. So I always felt this compulsion as well, but never one-on-one. Always felt like it was like groups. Like I'd be the guy to speak to.
Well, you're
groups.
doing great stuff.
Yeah,
with huge groups.
I'm doing it. Yeah, that's for sure. We're really fortunate. Me and Dennis are putting the finishing touches on the last video probably tomorrow for our fire prevention thing.
Okay.
And it's just so special because we'd given it to the network a couple months ago, most of the episodes, and they just sort of sat there. And then I got a private message from the woman who's in charge of content over there. She's real strict. She's been real strict on us in the past. There's things we couldn't say because she's the censor. And she was like, "This stuff is so good. There's so much information that people don't know and hear." They were going to throw it. We thought they were just going to throw it on a Saturday morning. Just to play during Fireman Sam because it sort of fits. And she was like, "No, we want to give it a designated afternoon time slot that is advertised like this is going to play."
So they're seeing the value.
They're seeing the value.
Yeah.
And for me, it's just like, this is what I love to do. But I don't necessarily know if everyone else feels the same way. But that's nice confirmation.
Well, we have our different niches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the idea of filling a need where someone else isn't already doing it. That's a really special thing. Did you ever read The Critical Path by Buckminster Fuller?
Mm-mm.
Do you know who Bucky is?
Mm-mm.
Buckminster Fuller. He was he was one of America's great geniuses like Tesla or Einstein.
Okay.
But his genius was connection, how things connected to each other. Like the art of kinesiology was sort of invented by him. He invented the geodesic dome. Where have you seen those weird toys at the museum stores?
Expand.
Yeah, you pull one piece and it expands all. That's his invention. That was his thing. But so he just, for some reason, his brain just saw how things are all connected. And at the end of his life, he wrote a book called The Critical Path. And The Critical Path was his personal opinion about the path that humanity would need to take in order to survive, according to how he saw the connections of everywhere from trade routes to resources, how things move from one place to another, how economies work, et cetera. He saw the big picture, and one of his personal things was, I only want to do things that fill a gap where someone else isn't working in that area. And I want to provide whatever I can in that area, but not for sale. Just make it available if people want it. That was sort of his idea.
I think that's perfect. And that makes me question, is social media and video games and all that sort of thing ruining the connectivity that he's talking about, the infrastructure of connectivity that we need? That's a whole nother.
It's like it's morphing.
It's a whole nother
in a
topic,
sense, right?
Yeah.
There's sort of because there still is connectivity, but the value of it's like a different. It's on a different wavelength, and I don't know if it helps or it has potential to help. Obviously, when Facebook started, it's like the best thing ever. But
the lack of connectivity between individuals. But getting back to what you're talking about, going to work with a sense of purpose. Yeah, that's valuable. Knowing that you're filling some kind of niche. And so mine is not big. I don't see a ton of people. It's impossible because I do it individually.
That is interesting. So I mean, it's not like, okay, if you didn't have the position, someone else would take your job.
Right.
But at there's something sort of different about that.
We're all replaceable.
Yeah.
But I mean, my sense of purpose is to go into work and make myself available. And then it's up to the clients to come.
Right.
Yeah. But I'm there if they want to. That's the thing. There's somebody present if there is a need, especially in the genre of psychotherapy counseling.
In psychotherapy counseling, take me back though, when you began in San Francisco? San Diego?
San Diego, yeah.
Yeah,
I was working with children there too. Yeah. Severely emotionally disturbed is what they were labeled.
Severely emotionally disturbed.
Yeah. See, these are the foster kids that couldn't be in foster homes because they were too dangerous to others or themselves. Yeah. So I was in a 48-bed facility as a supervisor of the evening shift, which is the most busy one because they're not in school.
I feel like the puppet team I was on when I was 13. The family that ran the puppet team, they were foster parents, and I think they were sort of like the last, like, if the kid doesn't make it here, the kid's going over. So it was
going into
that was their passion
center
as well, was like having foster kids. Have you kept in touch with anybody? Has there been any individuals that?
Not well. I did run into, sadly, a very impactful young man in my life. His name was Luis, Mexican kid who was taken away from his mother, and the mother used to come and visit once a week, then once a month, then once every 3 months. She just eventually disappeared, and he was abandoned into the system. No parents, basically orphaned. And he was one of the most violent kids that we worked with, and he could tear up a room. He could break apart furniture. He was a tough, strong kid, and it took probably 4 of us adult men to eventually calm him down. And while we're holding him, he's spitting and biting and doing everything he can and just spitting vitriol. And you just, what you're doing is trying to keep him safe.
Yeah.
And we're holding him in a very safe way. To keep him from hurting us and to keep him from hurting anybody else and himself. So sometimes he would just go and go and go, but then he would become exhausted. And at the end of it, he'd just put his head on somebody's shoulder that's next to him, kind of affectionately, like, there's a safe spot. I miss my mom. That was his whole reason for exploding was he was angry because he missed his mom. I ran into him, unfortunately, at an adult crisis house several years later, where I was doing counseling for adults coming out of psychiatric hospitals.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, mainly for suicidal
Mm-hmm.
attempts or serious ideation. But his road didn't get any easier as he graduated into teenage homes now, which is probably similar to what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
But yeah, he recognized me. I didn't recognize him, and it was a nice reunion.
Okay.
And we worked together for a little while, but it was a very transitional type of
Sure.
situation. Other than that, no.
Really?
Yeah. But I do have students coming up to me now, like when graduation happens, somebody's leaving the university, and they'll come and tell me, "Wow, you really helped me
Mm-hmm.
in this situation." And it's just a wonderful thing because you don't do it for that. So that's like an extra kind of
Yeah.
bonus that you don't expect.
Yeah.
Because we're just doing it. We're just going about the business of helping people keep a balanced life and achieving what they want to achieve. It's certainly not my idea of their success. In that question, what do you want? It's not what I want. It's how can I help you
Mm-hmm.
achieve what it is that you want? Yeah, it's fun stuff.
Yeah.
It can be tough for an empath because sometimes I find myself wearing the sadness of others, carrying it.
Yeah, we
wearing
had
it.
talked on the phone and I
Yeah.
talked about compassion fatigue.
Yeah, compassion fatigue it's a real thing, or vicarious trauma is another thing. So you can experience vicarious trauma by listening to somebody's story, or having several trauma victims in your counseling schedule at one time. Sometimes, you just need a break.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need to just shake that stuff off.
Yeah.
Even talk to somebody else about it, because counselors need counselors too.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask if anyone else you have any other questions? Because Mercy, if you have a question, that'd be great. We had been invited by an organization to go. They didn't even have the funding yet, but they must have had some funding because they flew us down to the coast, and we interviewed several teachers and counselors and community health workers that were involved in child sexual abuse. And so it was a couple, 2 days or 2.5 days of just listening to people tell what's
story.
going on locally.
Yeah.
It was not ever abuse victims themselves. It was people who talked to them talking to us.
Uh-huh.
So it was like the highlights.
Yeah.
And at the end of that was emotionally really.
That was intense. We talked to the children's department, the people who were handling kids.
Mm-hmm.
We talked to the children's departments, people who are handling kids, and it was intense.
Yeah, and it was during the Shakahola time.
Oh,
Oh,
that's
wow.
right. It was during Shakahola. And so it
The
was
shock and horror.
Those guys had specific stories about stumbling upon non-survivors with surviving children who were suddenly becoming aware of what was going on. And so for us, it was like, we're not therapists. We're not in counseling. We don't have any, I can't even imagine. We probably should have been a little more equipped with ourselves first. It ended up being wine on the beach. That's how we sort of got through it.
Through your vicarious trauma.
Yes.
Yeah.
But do you have some specific questions?
I have 3. Do you want them one at a time? Or?
Yeah, let's do a couple things and then we can wrap things up.
One of the things that we noticed was how people would punish kids displaying behaviors. So are there behaviors that kids have that makes you think like this is a symptom of a childhood trauma? So what is it that people should be looking out for when it comes to kids in schools or even campus students? Behaviors that they exhibit that makes you think this person might be having childhood traumas or adverse childhood
Experiences, ACEs. Let me repeat it for the listeners.
Yeah.
Are there any sort of behavioral things that children do that are basically a signal to you that says this behavior is a result of an adverse childhood experience?
Absolutely. When a child is sexually abused, young or through 5, 6, 7, 8 they will repeat that behavior. They may start exhibiting that behavior themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Or they can shut down just emotionally, where they don't want to interact with people at all. Or something small can happen,
Mm-hmm.
and you would have just thought that the world ended. You know, it's. I think you can sum it up with a severe lack of emotional regulation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we had, as a performer, guys, when I used to perform at churches as well, there's quite a few responsibilities for performers who are going in front of children, where we have to do pretty regular workshops, et cetera, to learn about things, and also weed out those of us who may also background checks, et cetera. Yeah. And I was at it was an Easter at a church, and I was the guest performer for the children's church, or so it was huge, one of those mega churches, you know. And a kid in the middle, in the back of the thing, a little girl started like violently masturbating, and she was like 6 or 7 years old or something like that.
Yeah.
And the kids next to her were looking like, what are you doing? But no one saw it but me and those other 2 kids on each side of her. And I was like, okay, well, I mean, this has to be addressed.
That's a pretty extreme case.
Yeah. So
but yes,
immediately I went to the children's pastor after my presentation and said, yo, this person, this is what happened. This is what time it happened. This is what I saw. And he was like, okay. And then, because you have to deal with it, and everyone there was trained. And the story how it ended was, it's like this was this family's first day at church, ever.
Wow.
And so he had to go talk to the parents, and bring that up, and to escalate to whatever legal had to happen. And it was a big deal.
In the U.S., we have what's called mandated reporters, and so I think all church workers, all teachers, all social workers, all counselors. We're mandated by the law to report any kind of abuse, or worse,
or the symptom of whatever.
Or the symptoms. Yeah. But what I mentioned earlier was when a child changes abruptly. That's a big telltale sign. Maybe just becomes quiet to themselves when they were more active and involved, and then suddenly they're not. It may not be an extreme case like what you saw, or violence or anything like that, but a change in affect and behaviors, and they can be subtle. So parents need to keep an eye on their children and know their personalities, and be aware of abrupt changes. Yeah, it's a good question.
I'll put this in context, being a Kenyan.
I'm sorry, what?
I'm putting this in a Kenyan context.
Okay.
As Kenyans, we say, that's fine, that's normal. I got beaten up as a child. There's things that we experience as kids that we consider normal, and then as going into campus or high school, then we have these coping mechanisms that then highlights that for you as a psychologist to see that this coping mechanism is because of something in the childhood. Are there coping mechanisms that you've seen that you've noticed are very prevalent with kids in Kenya?
Are there coping mechanisms that you have seen in, I'm guessing, with older students that are indicators that something happened when they were a child?
I think in a lot of cases, I've seen loners, people who just won't socially engage because it hurts too much. Yeah. Or they're using substances to cover up the pain. That's a common one as well. Knowing that they're intelligent, but their inability to focus on academics because of past traumas. And trauma would be, one of the symptoms of trauma is intrusive thoughts.
Really?
So thoughts of the trauma that aren't necessarily welcome, but they come anyway. That can interrupt a student's time in class or while they're reading and studying. Yeah. So the coping mechanisms, sometimes there just aren't any. They just do their best to carry on, but they're not carrying on in a balanced way, whether it is academically or if it's substance abuse or it's not being social, afraid to make friends.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or being overly busy.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
The idea of not being balanced doesn't necessarily have to be socially negative.
Right.
It could be considered quite positive.
Yeah. Like a workaholic.
Mm.
A student can be a workaholic, join all sorts of clubs and be just completely busy and not trying to cope with the past and the memories by pushing them out with busyness and involvement. And I've run into some like that as well. You know, you wouldn't suspect because they're so articulate and social and engaging and charming. Yet then getting to know them in the counseling office, just go, oh my goodness, can't believe that happened to you.
Yeah, I think I remember being surprised by that my senior year, where there was someone that we grew up with that seemed like they had everything together and was like this straight A, sort of like just joined everything, did everything, was everything, and then one day they just lost their mind. I was like, how's that person capable of that? But now, in retrospect,
And extreme cases, suicides of somebody you thought maybe had it all together.
And it was a coping mechanism to deal with.
It's the final one.
Yeah.
But
having it all together itself, I mean,
right.
was the coping
is
mechanism.
to mask it.
Is to mask.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Is there anyone who doesn't have these?
No, I think maybe you're the only one,
right?
I think
mine
most
happened
of
later
us,
in life. Mine all
most of us have
30s.
something if we admit it.
Yeah. I guess. I mean, I feel like I've definitely had adverse life experiences, but I don't think they happened when I was a kid.
Right.
You know. I
mentioned mine, and having a strict disciplinarian in the house was, it was there was a lot of pressure to behave and not get out of bounds.
It's funny because people will say like, oh, you must have been a real spoiled kid who got his way and was, had all those characteristics. The truth is I was extremely good. I was a very, very kind, very good, very, very just proper, full of manners, asked permission
what
for
happened?
everything. It changed. It went away. But I think it happened because my older brother changed his last name, which hurt my parents. And then my older sister, she got pregnant when she was like 16. And then, so that and my conservative parents had trouble with that. And then my other brother ran away when he was 16. I was 8 and then went to prison. And so I saw sad dad and crying mom all the time. And I was, no, not me. I'm going to.
So that was your purpose.
My purpose was to make them happy. I gotta be the best. I think eventually I just resented all that and I just became what I am now. Just a terrible person. But I think that was my, it wasn't like a trauma, but it was like it certainly guided made the kid decide to be whatever he was at that time. Yeah.
That was the nurture you experienced, which made you turn out like that.
Yeah.
And
then eventually I just became a jerk. Not a jerk, but I lost my manners. I don't know what happened.
I'm not going to comment.
I wish I was that 12-year-old boy still. That 11-year-old kid who was so good. But one more. You have another question?
You're a dad, and the thing with kids sometimes is that when they go through tough experiences, they don't want to say it because they don't want to hurt their parents.
Yes.
As a dad, what would you tell dads as a way of encouraging their kids to open up, even they might say might hurt them.
So the question will be, David, you know that a lot of children who have had adverse childhood experiences don't necessarily want to express it because they don't want to hurt their own parents, who were either responsible or negligent to what was going on at this time. And what advice would you give to a parent or to a...
Yeah, how do you advise parents so that they can help their kids open up, give them that?
How do you advise parents to get their kids to open up?
It's a really, really difficult thing to do, first of all, because people protect their parenting styles almost as much as they protect their lives. Nobody's going to tell me how to parent my child, type of thing. But if somebody were to come to me and ask me, then that would be a different thing. That's an area that I don't tread on.
Yeah,
is parenting. I have offered some, I don't even know if you'd call it advice, maybe just some observations to parents. What I do teach parents when I get the chance is to listen and to be open. And as a trained counselor, positive unconditional regard is that's my whole premise. Being non-judgmental and accepting of my clients and whatever it is that they want to share with me. And sometimes it's quite shocking, but without judgment. So I let them know right in the very beginning, confidentiality, nobody else is going to know. And there will be no judgment coming from me. If a parent could reach that ability to, and that's difficult for a parent because we have all these expectations for our children, and teachings and morals and ethics and cultural considerations that they must adhere to. So what if, it depends on the case, but I would I keep it simple and say, listen to your children and guide them in the way that they should go, that's up for debate and could mean many different things. But I think, as a Christian, Christ was a great example for us to be kind to children and to accept them in their childlike spirits, and then to guide them. I will say one more thing, and I've also told parents at a church, and I've not been invited back since, that there's a misunderstood scripture in Proverbs, and it's often quoted as spare the rod, spoil the child. That's not what the scripture says. Whoever hates his child and does not spare the rod is giving good counsel. So that has been interpreted throughout the centuries and in a lot of cultures as you got to have a rod, and you got to beat your kid with it. However, there's another scripture written by the father of Solomon that wrote that one, and that is King David. He wrote, "Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me." If you look at what shepherds use, and Christ is called the Good Shepherd, ultimately, he's the best and Good Shepherd. The only time he raised his fist or his whip was to clean out the corruption in the temple. Otherwise, it was all love and guidance. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. A shepherd uses a rod as to protect his children, his flock.
Yeah.
You very rarely see a shepherd beating a sheep.
Yeah.
You'll see Maasai tapping their cows,
Yeah.
but they're not beating them.
Yeah, and that rod's not for the cows per se. It's for
And it could be for protecting them.
It's for protecting. Yeah.
It's for protecting them. The staff is for rescuing and guiding in the path that they should go, which is what shepherds do all day, and herders.
Yeah.
They take their valuable flocks and herds into the areas that are most beneficial and safe for them. I think parents can do the same. And it takes a lot of work, and it's a difficult thing to do. And I have 3 children, and we're all now in their 30s, and I was nowhere near a perfect parent. I can look back and have regrets, but that is something that I try to teach, is that the rod and the staff are for guiding, rescuing, protecting, not beating.
I mean, it may be an unpopular opinion, but I do feel like everyone regards their parents a little more than they should in this way. So many parents are parents in their early 20s.
Yeah.
But if you look back at your own life and how you were, or I was in my early 20s, like, I wasn't making the best decisions.
No.
You know,
well, your brain's not fully developed until you're 25, 26 years old.
And so this idea that,
And
like, well, my mama was a good mama. Maybe she was. No, not necessarily.
Yeah.
I mean, look at your own life. Think about how you were when you were 20. My mom was 17 when she had her first kid. She couldn't have been real brainy, you know. And that's okay. It's okay. It's okay to admit that, like, we're not fully formed great people in our late teens and early 20s.
Yep.
And so, I mean, and I remember I had a mentor who at one point shook his head and looked at me and said, we really messed up with our firstborn. We didn't know what we were doing. We didn't know. Most wonderful people, long-term marriage, absolutely. But they started off with their marriage when they're like 19, 20. And in their 40s, they're able to say, whew, I really
somehow we got through that.
Don't know.
Yeah.
We got through it, but did our kid get through it?
Right.
Because we were making, the wrong. And so
Casualty.
But and the only reason I say that is because I had heard that there was a people group in North America, and I don't know which group it was, but they said that the grandparents raised the children. Just the way it was. As soon as you have a kid, you give it to your mom and dad, and they raise it.
Because they know already.
Yeah, and it makes so much more sense to literally have every
have the
generation
wisdom.
raised by
The
grandparents.
Yeah.
I mean, it just makes so much sense to me.
Yeah,
Like,
I like
gosh,
that too.
I really do.
Yeah.
And so just automatically praising people because they have children, which is, hard. They don't like to hear it because I don't have kids yet. But it's the most common job. It's literally the most, everyone does it.
It's the easiest to to get there.
It's the easiest it's the easiest job to acquire.
Yes.
Is the job of parent. And so to automatically hold them in regard. I like the idea of holding my grandparents in regard. But yeah, I don't know. I got to figure out how to articulate that in such a way where it doesn't offend people. But the whole idea is basically like, when we're young, we're not smart. And that's a tough time to be raising new humans.
I often tell the university students that, before you make that decision or you just follow that urge, think first, because your brain's not fully developed.
Yeah.
Think about the consequences. Are you ready for an STD? Are you ready for a baby? Are you ready for an emotional connection? Are you ready for all of these consequences that could come just as a result of following that urge?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know how many years that sunk into.
Sunk into mine. It's like, no way. There's no way I'm equipped for this. I probably am now, but any other questions? We all sound terrible.
Okay. The last two questions. One was, what is gender? Are you getting both the genders opening up, or is it different the way they open up in counseling? Do you think it should be different from that? And then, as a psychologist, you are taking on everyone's trauma. How are you coping with that?
Yeah.
So the two questions are people from the different genders coming up with different questions or having different situations. Is one more open than the other? Right?
Sorry?
That's the question. Is one gender more open than the other, or more receptive to therapy?
That's an easy answer. Females are far more open to doing therapy and would comprise probably 95% of my client base.
95.
High, very, very, very high.
Yeah, I just wish guys could talk more.
Yeah. And I'm one that doesn't like to talk about my issues myself.
Well, that's the follow-up question.
Yeah.
She's asking, as a therapist, do you have any? How do you cope with all this?
There's a few ways. I find myself in prayer. I find myself in gratitude.
Yeah.
Expressing gratitude. I go to the gym. I work out. I blow off physical energy. And stress my body out in positive ways. I do a lot of breath work.
Okay.
And I think that really helps as well. And also just the knowledge that I cannot carry all the trauma. I just can't. So I'll hear it and I will empathize and we'll work on it, but I try to leave it in the office and not take it home. There's some, I'll just admit, that will stick and it makes it difficult. And that's when I need to talk it out. Or I've been known to cry it out at some times. I don't have anything else to give other than letting it vicariously just come out of my body in the form of sadness and sobbing, and have an episode of that. And it's extremely rare for me, but it's happened. And it's a cleansing of some sort to allow the body to let go of the pain that it's carrying.
So, and that's the thing that you can't hardly meet an adult woman who hasn't been abused by a male.
It's rare.
It's really rare. Yet at the same time, abusers it's usually an outcome of having been abused, generally speaking. Not 100%, right?
Yep. Yeah.
But with men comprising only 5% of the people who seek help, you can see there's a huge lopsided view of mental health in men.
Mm-hmm.
There just simply isn't it's equally available to men,
Absolutely.
But somehow it isn't perceived as being equally needed, available, or accessible, or something's going on where guys aren't.
No, they're just inwardly saying, I'm going to handle it myself.
Yeah. And if you are a guy, I think what you just expressed as David Jones saying, hey, the admission, I cannot carry this myself. And so therefore I will enter into a spirit of prayer.
Mm-hmm.
I will work out in healthy ways. I'll stress my body in the gym, and I'll specifically work on breath work because it's a scientific proven method of controlling your brain waves, your nervous system, etc. Do you also speak to other men? Or women? I mean, are you seeking therapy yourself?
I'll just say I do share with some counselors.
You do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a mutual thing, actually.
Oh, I see. So it's set up between you guys to say, hey, we have a designated time.
Or it just happens.
It just happens.
Yeah. You know, when we ask each other how we're doing, we really mean it.
Yeah, you really mean it. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And then we allow ourselves to say, yeah, well, it's been tough. There's this one.
So that would be sort of the fifth prong is, counselors counseling one another.
Yeah.
And maybe that's it, Chalo. Maybe that's where we go, is we figure out how to do a presentation in schools that addresses the elephant in the room. That we need guys. We need guys feeling like this is an option.
Mm-hmm.
We need men feeling like this. It just happened to me. It happened through Bible study, but it just happened to be guys just willing to talk to other guys. And I had that since I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
It's always very easy for me to speak openly about how I feel, what I'm stressed with, what I'm dealing with, whatever. But that was just kind of coincidence. It was never expressed to me that men need it.
I think men do well in groups. Group counseling sessions where they can begin to open up and slowly the cracks in the ice widen and then the access is there. But it really takes some time to trust each other in the group. But also once you start relating to and to resonate with other men in the group, then it can come out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense because guys do sort of gang up. They go out together drinking buddies.
Yep.
It's not like twos.
Yeah.
It doesn't really happen in twos as much. I think
Not as
women
much.
tend to go out in twos, but dudes, I don't know. You ever do that? You ever go out with another guy consistently? It's not necessarily. Charles and I will do that. Charles, my co-host, who's not here, we end up together alone sometimes. It's not necessarily by design. We have some sort of reason to go somewhere, and you end up waiting for hours. It's just like, oh, this is good. It's quite refreshing to be able to just talk things out.
Yep.
But it sort of happens to us just because we're colleagues. But otherwise it's sort of gangs of dudes. But I think it's so important. I ask so many guys, like, hey, do you got friends? You got hanging out with people? And so many guys are just like, no one. It's either my family, my wife, or I'm just by myself. Yeah. It's like again and again and again.
Yeah. I did group therapy with domestic violence offenders.
Really?
Men.
Yeah.
Yeah. Severe cases. And the group comprised of anywhere from 10 to 12 of these violent offenders. And it took some time to get the work done. But some of the work was done, and I've actually heard from some that I was facilitating the group.
Yeah.
That it was a very, very, very helpful experience. But a really tough group of men to work with.
Did they ever stop? I mean, do guys who are violent, domestic abusers, it's not a one-off.
No, they learned it from their fathers, first of all.
Yeah.
And it's a tradition passed down in families. But we're talking about now men who suffered traumas from watching their mothers being beaten, and domestic violence they've witnessed, and then just realizing this is the way you do it, kind of thing. That kind of trauma can produce an antisocial disorder, personality disorder. Antisocial, not as in they don't socialize, but they don't care about the laws of the land. They don't care about morals. They don't care about ethics. They don't care about laws. They don't have any area of their brain that's empathetic.
Because they saw their fathers beat their mothers.
That's a big reason. Yeah,
Wow.
That's the way their brains developed. Is what would be the good of empathy.
Yeah.
It just doesn't have a place. So, because all laws, morals, and ethics, and people's feelings don't come into play, it's a very difficult group to work with. You can't say, hey, you got to obey the law. Well, it's the effing police's fault, not mine. That biatch shouldn't have got in my face, and then I wouldn't have had to hit her. It's everybody else's fault, not theirs, and the law is against them. So I kind of worked out a way with them to come in through the side door.
Okay.
Because many of them have been in prison, and they're hardcore dudes.
Yeah.
All way bigger than me, and they'd been in the prison yards lifting, and quite an intimidating group. So I would ask them, how was prison? Well, prison sucked. So you didn't enjoy it? Hell no. Do you want to go back? No, I don't want to go back. Do you want problems with the police? no, I don't want any more problems with police. And stop hitting your women. That will save you. So you have to go for their ego and their protection, because that's what they're after. They only think about their own survival. It doesn't matter about anybody else. You want to stay out of prison, you want to stay away from the police, all you have to do is stop and control your anger and stop beating your women. They're like, oh, yeah, hadn't really thought about that as a way of protecting their own.
Gosh,
it's not narcissism; it's antisocial.
Mm-hmm.
It's can be a mixture of narcissistic people are usually quite charming
mm-hmm.
and get their way
mm-hmm.
by following the rules
mm-hmm.
and working within moral confines and ethics. And those are your pastors.
Yeah.
Narcissists are often preachers, pastors, politicians,
and CEOs.
Those
are the big three.
Because they're also out there for their own ego, but they're willing to work within the confines of society.
Mm-hmm.
An antisocial, disordered personality type, they just don't care.
Right.
That's what our prisons are full of. So it seemed to work, that strategy of coming in through the side door of not trying to teach them morals and ethics and right and wrong. No. Oh, how can I protect myself from prison and all the unfortunate things that can happen?
How can I protect myself?
Yeah.
Gosh.
It doesn't matter about the woman or the kids watching. I also did a couple of groups with women as well, by the way.
Yeah?
Yeah. Violent offenders.
Yeah.
Yeah. Women that had stabbed their partners and tried to kill them and beat them up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It can go both ways.
Yeah, I've heard.
Yeah.
It can. Wow. But yeah, I guess group therapy for men would
So
be
yeah, it can be effective. Yeah.
But how do you get them to group? I don't want to join a group.
Right.
No,
I mean,
I've got what it takes to be open and honest and also draw that out of somebody else. But the idea of joining a group.
So typically men are forced into groups.
Yeah. Right.
Through Alcoholics Anonymous or church groups.
Yep.
Yeah. Like, this is what you men are going to do at church. You're going to meet as a group. And you're just kind of, corralled into it. Or domestic violent offenders, they had to go. It was a court order.
It was a court order.
Yeah. I
could see that. Yeah, I don't know. How would you ever join a group? A men's group? Here's my narcissism. If I was leading one, I could probably do it.
Right.
I could organize one.
Yeah.
But I can't imagine joining one.
I've never have.
Really?
No. Not a therapeutic group. No, I've always been the facilitator.
I think I would enjoy it if I thought that everyone was going to be into it and no one was weird. But
but you can't trust that.
I can't trust that.
No.
I think there's going to be some weirdos.
I got trust issues with that.
Right? If everyone was like me, it wouldn't be so bad. But I can't imagine that would happen.
Are we about ready to wrap?
Yeah, I suppose. You feel like you need to use the restroom?
I feel like I need to use the bed.
All right. I have no idea what time it is.
Yeah, this must have gone on for a couple hours, huh?
Probably. Anyway, it's a real pleasure to talk to you, David.
Thank you.
And I
thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, and we'll sort of edit a little bit into the best highlights, but for the most part, I think we'll keep it as it is. Okay. And I think it's just great to have a couple of guys talk about this issue as well. And for anyone else out there who's listening to Me, I Mental, the podcast, I don't know what kind of takeaway you may have had, but I do like the idea that a guy who's actually a full-time guy who counsels people and also counsels men, also sits down with other counselors to deal with things. And I like the takeaway of that part of it is admitting that I can't carry everything myself, and I don't have to, and I can deal with this. But after that acknowledgement that I can't carry everything, that I could go into prayer or meditation, and I can go into physically working out and stressing my body in ways that isn't stressing my brain, in order to just as a pressure release for the stresses that happen in the brain, and also doing breath work that's scientifically proven as a way to regulate your circulatory system, as well as your limbic system and your psychological state, etc. And also the takeaway is, guys, we need to be talking to our sons, and we need to be talking to our friends and all that, and
listening.
Yeah, that's a big, huge part of it.
Yeah.
And so if the takeaway is those things, then I think you got something out of Me, I Am Mental, the podcast this time. Once again, my name is Darren Collins, and Charles Adede is suspiciously absent today. Maybe he was going to just run into some convicting conversation. Who knows? We'll talk to him next time and see why he was absent. But meimental.me is the website you can go to find out all of our information, and also links to all of our socials, as well as helpful links and articles that may be helpful for you if you're looking for help in terms of mental health, as well as that's about it. We're not asking for money. We're just asking for likes and shares. And so if you enjoyed the podcast today, send it off to another guy, another gal who might find it interesting. And thank you so much for listening to Me, I Am Mental, the podcast. My name is Darren, and thank you to our guest, David Jones.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the opportunity.
Bye-bye.